Hey everybody, this is Joe and I'm in my Houston, Texas garden. I'm in zone 9A and we're in the middle of January and there's not much to show. The garden is still very wintry. I haven't trimmed it down yet and it's going to get back into the 30s this week, and so I'm still leaving it untouched. There are things that have come up. You can see there's plenty of green coming up, and I have lots of flowers that were in pots that we protected from our last freeze. But I thought I would talk about seedlings for a minute. I've had a few people ask me about seedling identification. And so I thought I would talk to you about several ways that I'm able to identify seedlings. The first way is just to plant things. If you're planting things in from starting seed in little cells or flats or little pots, that because you've planted it yourself and you've labeled it, you're learning what they look like. This is a zinnia called Northern Lights. Another way you can learn from your packet. A lot of packets, not all, a lot of packets will have a drawing of what the seedling looks like on the back. So if I hadn't put these in little cells, or I had directly sown them into the ground, I could roll back through, a couple of weeks later and still know, oh, hey, that's not a weed. That is my zinnia that I planted there. So you learn through planting different things. Like this is two kinds of basil, but they have a basic form. All the zinnias, they may be different varieties, but zinnias have a basic sort of look to them. And it is another example. Cosmos has a particular look to it. So no matter what variety, your Cosmos seedlings are going to look basically like that. Another way that I have learned to identify seedlings is knowing what I planted there before. So I know that, see, I've got all of this coming up in the gravel, but I know that in this pot 2 years ago, I had pansies and little violas, and they self-seeded. I know that because I saw them bloom in the gravel. And so they have continued to self-seed. So I know I didn't plant these on purpose, but I know these are all little pansy seedlings. But I know that because I know that I had some in this pot. Another example is this is a little parsley seedling, and as is this little thing. But I know it's likely to be parsley because I grew parsley, and there's some here now. I grew parsley here last year, and I let it go to seed. The other thing that I have done is I've learned what are regular weeds that show up in my particular garden. So I know pansy seeds. These are little volunteer pansies. I know that I had evening primrose that I can't get rid of, and I recognize that from last year. I know this is a Texas bluebonnet. I'm pretty sure I've learned that from the back of a seed packet. I didn't know what this was, so I Googled it. Turns out, very common weed in Texas and in Houston. And so, I didn't do a very good job, but I know that doesn't belong because I've learned now wherever I see that, it doesn't belong. I think this is a larkspur. Now, I haven't grown larkspur successfully, but it doesn't look like any weed I am familiar with in my garden. And so I'll leave it because I think that's what that is. Now, here's another example. It's not really a seedling anymore, but this little fluffy thing, I know that came from a seed I threw out here. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't match any normal weeds that I am used to in my garden. And so I'll leave it and find out what it is. And that's the other thing I was going to tell you. But before I do that, Another way, and I did it in here, they haven't come up, is I sowed seeds in the shape of an X. So I know pretty much that everything that comes up in that X will be what I planted. But if I've got things sort of scattered, I can probably assume that those are not what I planted, and I can pull them back out. The last way that I find out what a seedling is sometimes I'll just leave it. If I'm not sure, because I throw so many seeds out, if I'm not sure, I'll let it bloom. Here's an example. I've ripped so much of it out, I had trouble finding an example. But see how it's just getting ready to bloom? I know I didn't plant anything that's that tiny, that has a tiny little white flower. And so I've learned that that is a weed. It looks so much like a pansy leaf sometimes to me that I will pull it up. There's a little self-seeded pansy right there. So I will pull this up, but again, like, I don't think that's something I planted, but I'm not sure. I threw so many seeds out, and seeds I'm not familiar with. So I'll let that get a little bigger. I'm pretty sure that's just a dandelion, but I let dandelions bloom in my garden. They're an early source of nectar for bees, and so I leave those. So sometimes you just have to let it go a little while. Sometimes it just needs to get a little bit bigger before you can identify it as a weed, and sometimes you got to let it get a lot bigger. And sometimes you just forget. This little guy, I can't remember. He's everywhere out here. I can't remember whether that's a weed or something else, because this is an area where I put wildflowers. And so you see my little Texas bluebonnets coming up. So I'll let it get bigger and just kind of see if it looks like something that I planted a little later. Well, I hope that gave you some ideas about how to learn. I can't remember who it was that asked, but I hope it was a little bit helpful. Well, I hope your garden looks better than mine. Mine is pretty sad right now. And I hope that it's warm enough in your area and you get to get back outside and start fussing around with stuff just like I have. Y'all take care. Bye-bye.